stop using git ignore. Actually, I'm joking. You need to use it, but you need to use it for the right reasons. Let's talk about what it is. You can create a file .gitignore, as you can see behind me, in the root of your project, in the root of your Git repositories. And this file tells Git which files and directories to ignore when you're using any Git commands, especially git add and git commit. This allows us to also share these rules with other developers on the project who clone the repo. This is why the gitignore file itself is actually committed to the repo. I think most people are aware of the repository's gitignore file, particularly when they clone a repo or they create a new project, maybe using the command line command for Next.js, where it creates the project for you and will automatically add a gitignore file and include the Next.js files to ignore. And this will work like magic. Using the gitignore feature is great, but it has limitations, which is why I think the file is overused and often incorrectly. So Eddie, what is this problem that you're talking about? Well, most projects, repositories gitignore will include every possibility needed for different dev environments, different operating systems, different IDEs, different dev tools. And I believe this is wrong because 1, everybody uses different operating systems, IDEs, and dev tools. 2, the list will only keep growing and it will never end because there are new tools coming out all the time. And number 3, let's be honest, is the gitignore file trying to compete with the README file for the most updated file in the repo? I hope not. The project's gitignore, so the repo's gitignore, is only for specific ignore folders and files for that project. Some examples include generated files by the project. For example, if you're using Next.js, you want to ignore .next folder. Or if you're using a testing tool like Playwright, it creates the folder test-results, and this will be generated for every developer using the project. So we want those to be in the Git repos ignore for that project because everyone's going to have those files generated when they run the project locally. Let me know if you agree or disagree so far in the comments below. Here is an example of a gitignore file. The node modules, again, this is correct. This should be in here. Next folder, again, should be ignored. Build folder should be ignored. Absolutely great. I believe this is wrong because this is specific. The DS store file is specific to a Mac, and there'll be people on Linux and Windows will have different ignore files. I think that should go somewhere else. So there is a solution and I will get to it shortly. So Eddie, you've talked about the problem, but what about the solution? How can we fix this? Well, there is actually a really simple solution. I don't think many people know about it. There is a global git ignore to the rescue. Adding this file to your system, like I said, might sound like extra work. However, it is really quite straightforward and will save you so much time in making mistakes and a lot more work down the line. You're going to be so surprised how straightforward this is and how more people should use this. I believe every developer should be using the global git ignore. So let me explain how straightforward it is. The global git ignore file is the same type of file as a git ignore, so you can include things as you normally would. The format's exactly the same, the file type's exactly the same. You're already familiar with it. You just place it outside the repository, so usually in your home directory on your computer, and it will affect all your repos that you have locally. So if you want to ignore the .ds store file, then it will ignore it for all your repos. You don't need to add this to every project. So you can manage one file and it will benefit all your repos. Sounds great, right? I know you're excited to get started and to do this. So let's jump straight in. I'll show you literally in 2 commands how you can do this. In my home directory, I have a gitignore global. You can call this file anything that you want. I've called it global just in case I try to search for it. But again, you could just call this gitignore and it would work exactly the same way. Let me go edit that file and show you what's inside. Again, it looks the same format and style as you would see in a normal gitignore in the repo. These are specific to me though. These are not committed to any project and these are specific to me. I create a lot of Git patches, so I ignore all Git patches in all repos. You're already halfway there, and the final step is to tell Git about this file that you want it to be aware of for all your local repos. So here you would do git config global core excludes file, and a path to the file where you have it. In my case, it's got global at the end. Yours might not have that. It might have a different name. It might be in a different location, but that's fine. And you hit enter. And then what it will do is it will update your Git config. You can see here it's put core, and then it's got exclude files, and here is the path to the file I want to use on all my repositories. And you can see other things I've got here, which is commit. Yes, I want it to sign on every Git commit. So all my commits are signed across all repos. I've got aliases here as well, which is very cool, which do things like Git LG, and then you can see I've got a different type of logs. But I've got videos on how to do those aliases, how to do signing your commits. If you have any questions about that, let me know in the description below and I can create more content on it. But we're not done yet. Give me a moment more. There is a caveat. I know what you maintainers are thinking. Yes, that is straightforward for people to use, but people don't do it. I'm a maintainer myself, so I know you maintainers are thinking, but people don't set this up properly. So if I don't have all these excludes, ignores in my repos git ignores, and pull requests come in with all these extra files, and then there's back and forth of trying to ask them to remove these files out of the pull request because they got nothing to do with the pull request. So to make the contributors and the maintainers' lives easier, then having it in the repos git ignore is sometimes the easiest option. I get that, but I do understand this. I really do. I've been there many times before, but what I've noticed is this leads to them people trying to take advantage of that strategy by making it a green square kind of chasing game. And this results in pull requests coming in now of adding every single dev tool to the repos git ignore file, trying to cover every possibility. And the git ignore file is like 3 or 4 pages long. So to conclude, I think the contents of the repos git ignore is for the projects, files, and folders that we want to ignore. Only those, not the users. Developers can customize their own global git ignore with any extra exclusions they need. And as a maintainer, don't fall into the trap of putting every possible exclusion into the repos git ignore. This really is a sticky plaster approach in my view. What we should try and do is upskill and educate the community so everyone benefits in the long run. Honestly, tell me what you think in the comments below. I really appreciate you watching this video. And if you want to geek out on real world open source projects, come and join me in the EduHub community. We've got some amazing projects and amazing maintainers and contributors there. I look forward to seeing you there. Link in the description below.